Hello, everyone. It's me again, Jon Oltsik, here in the Boston studio for another great episode of my podcast, The Cybersecurity Bridge. For those very, very few, and it's only a few people, I think, in the world now who haven't seen the podcast yet, each episode is broken into three sections. The first section, we talk about the present of a particular area of cybersecurity. The second section, we talk about the future of that area of cybersecurity. And the third is the cybersecurity bridge, where we talk about getting from today to the future. And I'm just couldn't be happier on this lovely Friday here in New England to record with an old friend and a former analyst. I think you call it a recovering analyst, a reformed analyst.
Reformed analyst, correct.
Anton Chuvakin, who is now, and I have to read this, works in the office of the CISO for Google Cloud. Cloud. Anton, nice to see you. Introduce yourself in case someone doesn't know who you are.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think there's enough enough of me out there on the internet. So my name is Anton Chuvakin. I do work for Google Cloud Office of the CISO. I am not going to go into a debate if it's a CISO, a CISO, or anything else, because I feel like we should discuss security, not words, not acronyms, but except possibly EDR. I discuss EDR any day. And my focus lately has been on security operations, of course, as before, securing AI, quite a bit of that, and of course, cloud security, because we have this whole cloud here to secure.
That's great. And we will get into our discussion. But before we do, Anton, are you ready to play cybersecurity trivia?
Absolutely.
Okay. And I'm going to guess you're going to nail this one, but you and I are quite familiar with the MITRE ATT&CK framework.
Mm-hmm.
Of course. And the question is, what year was the MITRE ATT&CK framework released to the public? Was it 2013, 2014, 2015, or 2016?
I'll probably go for the earlier dates, but I mean, admittedly, the resolution of my mental telescope would not let me tell 13 from 14 apart. I would guess either 13 or 14. I don't know which one of the two.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, you're wrong. It was introduced internally at MITRE in 2013, but it was released to the public in 2015. That was a tough question. I get it. But let's move on. So the present of security operations, broad question. What's your thoughts on it?
Sorry, what question? The present, what's the present?
What's the present state of security operations?
Oh, you want like a one-word answer or what? Like, security operations is fine.
There you go. No, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, it's if you want a short answer, I would probably go with uneven. Uneven is my answer, not fine, because I do see spots of excellence. I do see spots of mediocrity. I do see spots of complete disaster, of course, and everything in between. So to me, uneven is where I would go.
Yeah, I like that. I think it's an 80-20 rule. I think 20% of, and that's probably aggressive, but 20% of organizations, let's say, have a good understanding, may not be excellent at it, but have a good understanding of what's needed and how to manage that. 80% don't. And that is a problem. Now, that depends on company size. It depends on industry regulations, et cetera. Is that about what you think?
It would depend on the boundaries where you define okay versus great. I certainly would not say that 20% are excellent at detection and response and SecOps. But to be honest, the number of companies that are, for good reasons, think they're doing well, probably would be about that. Yeah, I think that above mediocre / okay with some reliance on luck, yeah, I would go with 20. Yeah.
Okay, so let's dig in a little bit. And my first category that I wrote down is data. So there are more data sources today than there used to be, and there will be more data sources in the future. Companies don't have access to that data or don't get the right data. They may have the right data today, but new types of threats change the types of data that they need. What are you seeing there? What's the biggest issue there for you?
Okay, so I feel like the challenge is just not new. It's a challenge that is inherent in our beloved domain of detection and response. So in essence, if we take our time machine to 2003, we can debate whether to take data from Windows client logs. Probably a decent debate of 20 years ago is, I'm collecting Windows Server data. Do I collect Windows client data? That's, I'm vaguely remembering this was a discussion. So to me, that was painful to decide for people, and they were not sure and all that. That was like predates invention of EDR by 10 years. So today we have similar debates, but for something else. So to me, the decisions to collect, decisions to store, decisions to retain are all very normal. Like we make those decisions all the time. So most companies who are good at it have some kind of a framework. They run by use case. They run by what you need to detect. They run some of the more enlightened ones run by threat models, which then drive the types of telemetry they need. But ultimately, it is, to me, part of life. I mean, I don't see any kind of horrendous disaster going our way. I mean, there's more data, sure, but the data has been increasing. We now have beautiful tools to do the management better. We have all these pipelines and security fabric and all this stuff, which is kind of like I used to joke that it's middleware for middleware, but it's just middleware for tools that can decide more elegantly, more analytically what to collect, and you use them and you're okay. I mean, I think it's like complaining about threat actors in security. That's just stupid. Threat actors threaten. That's their job. So you're not going to complain about that.
So first of all, I love the fact that you use the term middleware, because I grew up with middleware, but people don't say that for some reason anymore.
Old people. We've branded ourselves as old people.
It's crazy. But so in a perfect world, the data you collect is driven by your really good analysis of threat intelligence, your understanding of the MITRE ATT&CK framework, your detection engineering excellence. That's got to be a small piece of that 20% that actually do that.
Well, I didn't say only driven by that, because of course you would have broad collection, say for incident response, you would have collection for compliance. I'm not really discounting that, but for example, collection for compliance doesn't change that much, so it's just doesn't have the newness. I mean, there's some newness because compliance, for example, I'll take my beloved at one point, PCI DSS, which may say you should collect data from the system that processes payment cards, right? But the system that does that today is different from 20 years ago. So the logs would also change. But the point I'm making with this is that the threats and technology change probably drive more changes. Regulation drives you sort of mostly do the same thing, just with new systems. So that's why I am not just pointing out the detection. I'm saying detection, investigation, response, compliance, other reasons. They're all bundled up together, and you go and evaluate them and decide what to collect. Sometimes you have a decision to make between collecting something you have no immediate detection value, and you're not sure about the investigative value, but it's useful as context. One of my favorite examples, of course, DHCP logs. I've not seen any detection rules that match against DHCP logs. Actually, maybe that's wrong. I've seen one. But DHCP logs are hugely useful for context. So all of these decisions get combined, and that's your collection set. Of course, I'm oversimplifying it quite a bit.
Well, that's what we do on podcasts, so that's okay.
Fair.
Let's talk about SOAR. So, I mean, SOAR has been very topical because of, and I'll mention this already, but is AI going to replace SOAR? What's that? So in your experience, what is a leading edge company doing with SOAR that other companies can learn from?
So I'm going to go take a short detour. I had a debate, it almost escalated into a fight on LinkedIn when I asked people who are excellent with, if you are excellent with using SOAR, if you know what to do, if you use SOAR well, do you need AI SOC? And I think at this point, we are probably clocking at about, maybe 40,000 views to that post. But here's the thing. What I'm trying to say that right in my question, I said, hey, if you want to respond by saying nobody's good at SOAR, please don't. I know that success with SOAR is a minority endeavor, but I can assure you there are companies doing well with SOAR, and they're happy with their tools, or at least satisfied, and they're using them well. So that does exist. So where I'm going with that is that the companies that succeed with SOAR likely knew what they want to automate and what processes they want to streamline before they started. It does not mean that 3 years later, they only do that. they've had sort of like, maybe I should call them SOAR native use cases that appeared once they realized what automation can do. But they started with a very crisp view of what to automate. We have 5 things. One of them is a major time suck for our team. We spend 40% of time doing that. The SOAR vendor who just called us up says they can automate that. Let's go check whether it's true. Oh, wow. Yeah, it is true. We saved 40% of time in our SOC. What's the next use case? Next one is this one. Okay, let's do that. It is not rocket science to say that, but it is occasionally very rocket science to actually implement it at a large company. But to me, this type of sequence of logical sequence of use cases to automate and to streamline and to measure with SOAR is the secret, quote unquote, secret to success.
I agree. I mean, in my experience, the first thing that people did was automated away the easy stuff, the easy, tedious, repetitive stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And if they were good at this, then they had dedicated engineers really looking for things to automate. And as opposed to the people who did this badly, they bought it to automate phishing investigations, and then they said, well, now what do we do? So
I think that's not the worst. I think that people who had phishing as a major time suck and overhead, and they bought it for phishing, were happy, and then if they did realize what's next, they're also happy. But people who bought SOAR to automate security, this is absolutely the worst. It's when they had this super vague idea that they're going to buy this tool and it's going to automate security operations or automate security. That's the real failure mode. Failure mode is defining your goal in broad general terms. That's who died by the sword. Died by the sword. Okay, fine. That's not that funny. Yeah.
Not
but
bad.
if you just go for phishing, and then progress, I think you'll be mostly fine.
yeah, anytime you take a vague notion of automating security, improving security, whatever, you're in trouble because
Yes,
it
exactly.
just doesn't work like that. Now we have to move on to the future. And so, of course, we have to talk about AI, but I want to do it in this context. So UEBA was AI way back when. It was machine learning, and we called it that. We didn't call it AI. But in the early days, remember, it took a lot of effort. It took a lot of tuning. And so do you see that model repeating itself with some of these more finite AI use cases?
So let me briefly go back to the mid-2010s. And I feel like when UEBA vendors showed up, some of them sold their tools as requiring much less tuning than traditional rule-based SIEM. And it's really peculiar. I remember being an analyst at the time, and I looked at some of the stuff, and they said, well, our tool would run algorithms, and you don't need to tune every little fragile rule. And the argument kind of made sense. But when you realize that to tune a rule, you know what to do. You just need to do it. To tune ML, most people did not know what to do. So the tuning was probably less tuning activities per detection set was probably smaller, but the cost of each tuning activity was much higher. So the result is that tuning just changed for ML-based tools. And to me, most companies never got it. It's like, well, what do you mean we need an ML expert? We ain't got one. Okay, the business has one, but they're using them. They're 110% booked. What do? We don't know. And so ultimately, yes, you're right. Tuning did sink it a little bit, but maybe for a slightly different reason than SIM. Now, I don't think with Gen AI-powered tools, tuning is the same. I mean, ultimately, in most cases, we are doing the human review of artifacts that Gen AI-powered tool produces, whether it made a rule or it made a mitigation recommendation. It's not tuning as such, but it's more curation. And so it is yet another new take on what it means to add a human to something the machine produced, because that's what tuning was. I feel people struggle with this a little bit when they kind of either go too far with trusting the machine, in which case they just get bad results, or they go too little interest in the machine. And then you get the heavily manual workflow, which is AI powered. Like, why have that? So I feel like the secret, quote unquote, to tune in, I'm also given like air quotes here, for a Gen AI powered tools is kind of like quickly find that place of trust where you, oh, machine can do this. Okay, let machine do this. Machine cannot do this. I'm going to do this. This chunk is small enough, and I'm going to occasionally glance at what the machine is doing. There was somebody that posted a picture of a T-shirt on X, and it would be kind of, you'll see where I'm going. And the X mentioned something about human in the loop, on the loop, and then below it said, I just don't want any loop responsibilities. Like, let the loop loop. I don't want this. I just want to be aware it exists. And to me, that's the funny direction where I want to get to a place when I know loop exists, but I'm not in the loop, on the loop, around the loop. I'm not feeding the loop. I just know that the thing runs, and I have a way to check that it runs well.
Yes, and it's reminiscent of the IDS to IPS effort that went on a long time ago. No, I don't trust it. It might cut off a business process. I'll get in trouble. And then eventually people got it. So let me ask you this. So, and I thought this was a real brilliant synopsis of the role of AI for security operations that Google came up with, the 3 T's: threats, talent, and toil. And I like toil. It gave me a whole biblical vibe, but that's a different story. Of those 3, what are you seeing today? Which one is anyone kind of light years ahead of the other 2? And please don't say, no, all 3.
I feel like we roughly know what to do with Gen AIs with threat data. I mean, obviously we have a massive operation connected to threat intel, and they do use AI heavily, and it's all very useful, very obvious value, but it's also kind of auxiliary in the sense that you can't do it manually. It's just going to be really painful. And so I feel like it's the domain where we know what to do and we're doing it. I think that Toil is the one that's the most promising and also somewhat more difficult because of what we just discussed with human trust. If I have a lot of Toil, and by the way, Toil comes from SREs, not from the Bible in this case, and SREs defined it as an activity or work that once you complete it does not make your system better off. And this changed my life when I read it for the first time, a good number of years ago, because I felt like, wait a second, that's all we do in a SOC. Nothing we do makes your system better once you complete it. You deal with an alert, the next one comes. Your systems aren't better. So you want the machines to do the toil, but you want the humans to build the machines. And that's the process that largely works out very well for us. But making it work in every other environment is more difficult. And this is where AI helps quite a bit by kind of summarizing, extracting knowledge and kind of shaping it into something that can then be handed to the machines to execute, and you would have a degree of trust of that. So to me, the first T is the most, is the one that progressed the most, and the last T is the most promising.
Yeah, and I just came from another conference from a different security operations vendor. I won't say their name, but they do some.
I won't be offended.
But here's what I heard from users is they are slow rolling AI into security operations. And it's not that they don't trust it, but they want to get used to it. They want to see where the value is. They want to measure the value, which is all well and good. But what they're really concerned with is the proliferation of AI throughout the enterprise. And of course, the governance, the security, the monitoring, the policy enforcement around that. Is that what you're seeing?
We're going to step away from the domain of SecOps and security operations for a moment and go into a domain of security and AI. And yes, that's absolutely true. I mean, while SecOps remains my kind of childhood love, so to say, most of my time today is spent on security and AI, governance of AI, security AI agents, and a lot of interesting stuff, including stuff that we are about to discuss publicly, shadow agents, employees bringing agents to work. And to me, when you brought up the point about proliferation of AI, we certainly see 3 big buckets within that. One is, of course, your company is using AI for something. You're building your tuning models. You're connecting to public models. You're doing whatever, like the corporate AI, including productivity and business process, whatever. The second bucket is, of course, shadow AI. Employees bring proverbial ChatGPT to work, and they use it for work, even though they're not telling the employer. But there's a third fun bucket, and that's embedded AI. And embedded AI means it comes with Salesforce, it comes with, well, Google SecOps, it comes with some other tools, it comes with security tools, comes with business tools. So you have to govern essentially corporate AI, shadow AI, and embedded AI. And that is really tricky. Admittedly, each one of them is tricky, but you have to do all three, because if you miss shadow AI, obviously your company is kind of in a domain of chaos where some things are productive and risky, and some things are just like going to complete chaos without much value. If you don't look at embedded AI, you almost miss a large part of the iceberg, because you have approved AI and shadow AI under sort of control, even though however you control shadow AI, I don't know. Well, I do, but for the sake of this argument. But then embedded AI is, I bought a tool, or a team bought a tool, and it has AI. That AI has access to corporate data because it's an officially procured tool. So in some sense, it is almost more dangerous than shadow AI. And sometimes we call it shadow AI type 2. I whip a credit card, I bought a SaaS to do marketing campaigns. That thing has AI. That thing connects to my identity store for login. Whoa, wait a second. That's a risk. Oh, tell me about it. So I think that that's why it's so exciting. I still think that DNR is very fun. Detection and response is fun. But lately, secure and AI have been almost as fun.
So in essence, you are you're affirming what I heard at the conference.
Correct.
And by the way, what I also heard it from every security practitioner I met with told me of at least one incident where an employee had shared personal identifiable information with an AI system. So it's it's happening. And I would ask them, well, what about governance? What about training? And they'd say, it's, I guess we're behind. So that's where we are. Before I move on to the cybersecurity bridge, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, because we've talked about this a lot. Will the future of security operations be centralized in platforms or decentralized with next generation, highly specialized AI-enabled tools?
So this is a really good question, and you're right to ask that. So I'm looking at November 6, 2023. And that day, I finished my blog post called Decoupled SIEM, Brilliant or Stupid. That's literally the blog title. And so the point I'm making with this, it's been almost 2 years ago. And for 2 years, I've been kind of thinking this. I go to LinkedIn, I watch what people say, and there's just enormous amount of excitement about how the future is federated and decoupled, and you do this there and this here, you buy this thing from there. And then it's like, if you look at the quote-unquote LinkedIn influencers, you assume that the future is very obviously decoupled and federated. But when you look at what people buy, they buy what is actually super coupled. SIEM plus EDR together, SIEM plus SOAR plus EDR. So I've been growing increasingly skeptical of the decoupled, decentralized case, because I see all the excitement on this side, but I see all the money changing hands on the opposite side. So I am well deep in the writing this sort of the part 2 or sequel or the conclusion to that saga. And I don't know what I would say yet, but it would be infused with a fair amount of skepticism to this approach. I feel like if I combine SIEM, SOAR, EDR, AI, SOC, other things, yes, you would have some platform fatigue and all that, but also you'd have advantages. And I am very skeptical about the mainstream appeal of decoupled and decentralized at this point.
It's a religious war in the industry, and you're right. If you follow the money, you may come to one conclusion. If you follow some of the thought leaders and the technologists, you'd come to another. I hate to say it, and it's probably a cop-out, but it's going to be both. It's got to be both.
Probably yes.
And I mean, let's look. I mean, when cloud first came out, you would have thought, oh, I will monitor that and manage detection and response through my SIM. And then tools like Wiz came about, and it was no, these are much better for that in a finite area. But I'll share the data with the SIM because my investigation might cross into my on premises. And so I mean, that's, like I said, it's cop out, but seems logical to me.
I think that you are, yeah. I mean, I'm looking at my draft and of that blog, and I feel like I probably would say that decoupled SIM is a part of the future of SIM, but I would not say that decoupled SIM and federated SIM and whatever else together is the future. I think it's part of the future, which is essentially your answer about both.
Yes. So you're copping out with me. I like that.
Yes, that's right.
It
depends.
Well, we're not analysts anymore, so we can cop out.
Yes.
So let's go on to the cybersecurity bridge, and I'll give you an example. I've been doing a deep dive now that I'm semi-retired. I'm doing more research, just purely research for my own sake, and I'm doing research into the healthcare industry. At least at the top of the healthcare industry, big teaching hospitals are doing incredible adoption of technologies, especially AI. And my feeling is that the gap between how fast IT is running and how fast security is catching up is growing. Do you see that in
sounds
the
like good
future?
news. Oh. So if I look at something like, to use our example of shadow AI, I would largely assume the opposite. From that one data point, it is not based on research, it's not based on a broad picture, it's based on a particular view. Because when we discussed governing shadow IT, people brought up all sorts of tools and processes and practices. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. So what we tried to do is to apply some of this to shadow AI. And we said, this applies, this bucket, everything, whatever you did for shadow IT or SaaS bought with a credit card 10 years ago, apply it. But the incredible speed of adoption of, say, LLM-powered chatbots is such that a certain quarterly committee to improve exceptions type of process does not fly. So in this one domain, I would come to the opposite conclusion, namely that the gap between security speed and a business speed is growing rather than shrinking.
Well, that's what I meant. I think
but you said shrinking. You said shrinking.
No, I said the gap is growing, but
growing. Yeah, I've heard shrinking for some strange reason. Okay. Yes, I definitely see the gap growing, and at least in this domain, I mean there may be areas where it's shrinking because, for example, some organizations are certainly better with cloud governance now, and they have a lot less of the chaos in the cloud, but they have chaos in AI now, so they've caught up. I don't know. Like I wish I can say something very optimistic. I would say that AI for security, which a topic we haven't touched that much, can accelerate some of this. And this is kind of where I would put my hopes. That if you are falling far behind the business and also behind IT, AI may be a part of the answer, but it's also kind of vague and hand wavy. Hopefully you can figure it out in your research.
I will try. So let's talk about AI for security. And I did mention that the practitioners I met with this week said they're kind of slow rolling it. Mm-hmm. But as you look out and experience this with Google customers, what do you see and what do you see the future there?
So I've looked at some surveys somebody did, and that person or a group had some experience with surveys, but I feel like they still made a lot of mistakes. And the survey asked some people whether they use AI for cybersecurity, and some kind of 47%, number doesn't matter. The point is it's not small, said, oh yeah, we use AI for security. And I'm like, that is wishful thinking. I can tell you right away that if you pick 100 companies at random, 47 of them would not have robust usage of AI for security. The number would be quite insane in 2025. But where I'm going with that is that we do see pockets of adoption of AI. I mean, obviously in the SOC is where it's arriving first. But I was very frustrated at this RSA when I was wandering around and torturing some AI SOC vendors for show me the data that it's working, show me the data that it's giving value. I mean, they all had fun use cases and promising stories and even occasional customer testimonial. What I wanted to see is data. I used to spend X hours on this activity. Now with AI, I spend X divided by 5 hours. And super critical, the quality is not worse. Because I can't triage alerts in 1 second. I look at the alert, there's this big button that says close, and I push button, close. A human can do it. A very dumb script can do it. I can achieve high speed. But of course, the quality would be 0. Well, actually, quality would be random because some alerts are false positives. If I close all of them, I'll probably be okay. But what I'm trying to make with a somewhat humorous point is that AI needs to prove the value with numbers, and it needs to prove that it doesn't just speed you up, but also retains or improves quality of what you're doing. That to me is, I would be at RSA 2026, hopefully, and I would show up and say, give me the data. Stop giving me this promising stuff about AI and stuff addressed to just hit people in the FOMO, fear of missing out. I just want to prove that your tool made my life better or can make my life better.
Yes, and as we're talking about the future, does it change the traditional SOC model of multiple tiers? Is there one tier that benefits more than others? Can I do things with lesser skilled people that I couldn't do? But you're right. I mean, we have to measure this, and any good CISO would would have this as a design goal is, okay, what are we trying to measure and how can you convince me that those metrics are solid and helping the business? So you're right.
Yep.
I'll look forward to 2026 as well for that. So unfortunately, we flew through a half hour of chat, and obviously we could do more, but I'm going to ask you the same question I ask every one of my guests, and that is, if you could give security practitioners, CISOs, security operations people, one piece of advice, what would it be?
I think given our focus of AI, I would probably go with something mundane and maybe a little bit stale. Stale as in like 2024 stale, not like 1994 stale. And that is don't fear the AI and have a framework for testing and adopting it. Because for some of the things that we mentioned, to catch up, you probably need AI. I'm sorry I sound like a salesperson. I have my vendor hat back there behind me. But don't fear AI and create a framework for experimenting and adopting, because you would need it a lot. Business would run at an even higher speed. And if you are falling behind now, you're going to start falling behind much faster. And as we discussed sometimes in shadow AI discussions, if you ban it, you'd have more of it. And if you ban it, you likely would increase the adoption of shadow AI, and you would go to a riskier form. So to catch up, you probably would need to use AI. And that means you need to learn it, not fear it first. Learn it, experiment, and then get there. That gives me hope. And it's not like he's from Google, they sell AI. It's really not about that. It's about the fact that you won't catch up otherwise. There's no other mechanism to catch up. And even the blanket ban is not that mechanism.
That's great. I agree. The only caveat or addition I would make is make sure that you're not using AI as a, what's the word? As a panacea, I guess. Make sure that you're doing the fundamental things right first, and then where does AI supplement where you're weak? So that may be, I don't know, basic, but I want to say that. And Anton, you know what? I looked at my notes. I wanted to ask you about this notion of a risk operations center. One vendor is really pushing this. I'm not buying it. I wanted to hear your, like I said, your take, but we're out of time, so I can't. So
it's really funny. I can give you a 3 second,
please do. 3 seconds.
3 second marketing message. Coincidentally, we interviewed that vendor on our podcast yesterday, literally yesterday, like the day we recorded it. So by the time your podcast airs, our podcast with that person may air, and they would explain it.
They can explain it. I'm not buying it, but they're selling it. So it's part of the industry. But Anton, thanks so much for being a great guest. Appreciate your time. And to my audience, I'll be back again in 2 weeks with another edition of the Cybersecurity Bridge. Thanks, Anton.
Thank you.